friends. Welcome to Season 7 and Episode 287 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Harmon. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian beginning my 18th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I want to wish a very happy book birthday to Amanda Jones. Her book, That Librarian, was launched on August 27th and is now available everywhere you get your books. Friends, I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 7. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. When Jared Amato's book, Just Read It, became available this past spring, I asked listeners to chime in with their favorite strategies and lessons they plan to use with their students. Lisa from Ohio sent in this feedback.
Hi, this is Lisa. I teach at Manchester High School in New Franklin, Ohio, which is in the Akron area. I have chosen to talk about question number 10 on the list that Amy offered up to us for Just Read It. The reason I want to use Chapter 10 is I really enjoyed Chapter 5 and the different activities that were written in the book to kind of extend certain texts. And specifically, the reason I chose this is because one of our English language arts teachers has just started teaching Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This was her first year. And I thought after she's kind of gotten her feet wet with the text, she might be looking for some extending activities. One of the extender activities I thought that would really be good would be the poetry prompts, which is on page 127. I think that would be a way for the kids to really be able to understand some of the characters a little better, a little deeper. And the other two activities, I actually picked 3 of them that I thought would be really good for this. On page 154, I like the lit playlist. I would think that that would be something that the kids would really enjoy doing, picking tunes that they feel really encompasses the mood and the tone of this particular book. And I think there would be a lot of songs out there that would work for that. And then finally, the connect and extend. A lot of our teachers have really been having difficulty getting kids to write research papers, so to speak. And I think this would be a good way for them to help to teach that skill without actually having to go into a very dry topic that they're not really that interested about. The example they give in this particular chapter under Connect and Extend is, again, for a long way down. And some of the key events they point out are gun violence, peer pressure, adolescent and generational trauma, family, grief, and following the rules. And I think that would really be, the kids could choose their topic, and I think that would really be a great way for them to get into writing a research topic, a research paper, or if not a research paper on those topics, at least helping them to write about these particular topics. I actually have already spoken with the English language arts teacher. We had a few extra days after the kids left at the end of the school year, and I was able to sit down and I really I actually sat down with all the language arts teachers and really encouraged them to read this book and to order it. I told them what an excellent read that I thought it was, a great professional development read. And I didn't find it dry. I found it very interesting and very entertaining. And I suggested to this teacher that I did have a few extender activities that I thought we might be able to work with the kids when she teaches Long Way Down this coming school year in 2024-2025. Thank you very much.
And now for today's episode, Just Read It, and my conversation with the author, Jared Amato, and school librarians and past guests on the podcast, Natalie Daily and Stephanie Wilson. Friends, I'm so excited. Jared Amato, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Friends, I cannot wait to introduce our special guest. Dr. Jared Amato is an award-winning English teacher and co-founder of the Project LIT community, a national grassroots literacy movement. Also, a two-time Blue Ribbon teacher, a recipient of the Penguin Random House Teacher Award for Literacy and Inspiring Educator Award from the Nashville Public Education Foundation. He has received his BA in English and History from Vanderbilt University, his master's from Belmont University, and his Ed.D. from Lipscomb University. After 13 years of teaching middle school and high school English in Nashville, Jared recently relocated to New Jersey, where he and his wife are attempting to keep up with their 2-year-old son. He is also the author of Just Read It, Unlocking the Magic of Independent Reading in Middle and High School Classrooms. Jared, I am so grateful that you have some time to spend with us this lovely summer evening. Thank you.
You are welcome. This is the time to do it, right?
You know, when I read your book, I realized immediately just how incredibly beneficial it would be in supporting school librarians in the work we do every day. When I shared out on X how much I enjoyed reading your book, it makes sense that I was asked if you would actually be a part of any upcoming recording that we did. So thank you for making time to join us today. This has been, I imagine, a really exciting time. A lot of people are excited about your book.
It has. I think getting a chance to meet readers and work with, to have this conversation tonight and to work with schools and with school districts around the country, like folks who I think I've been online a lot less the last couple of years. Like I think just for my own mental health, I've been kind of just, as you mentioned, following my 2-year-old son around, there's less time. But I think knowing that there are a lot of folks who are digging into the book, who've got the sticky notes. I saw some of your books before I got on, like who are digging into the book and taking their time with it. So the chance to get together online, in person, talk about it is really, really rewarding and just the beginning. And I think I do feel like this book will age well. I know there are some books that are about whether it's AI or just things that are really trendy, but I feel like we're moving into a point in this world, in this society where we, parents, teachers, librarians are all realizing like, hey, maybe we've got a little bit crazy with technology and how much time our kids are spending in front of screens. And so I think more and more people are coming to the good side, right? Which is realizing books are really awesome and spending time away from our screens and away from our phones and getting into books is really important and really helpful. And so I think this book, can be, my hope is one piece of, one tool that we can use to have these conversations and hopefully bring about some real change in our classrooms, in our schools, our communities. Well,
and I think what struck me as most noteworthy is all of the resources and strategies that you lay out step by step by step. And that's, you're incredibly generous with the strategies that you share. And all I was thinking about when I was reading it was how many ELA teams and how many groups of teachers are getting together to do this as the book they're going to do a book club at school, and this is going to be there's a mentor text, what kinds of things we're going to do to make a really meaningful change in how we teach our students. So I know right off the bat, I was like, well, every professional library in our schools needs to have this, at least a copy. And then our ELA team is going to want to make sure that they have copies for everybody on their team as well. I wasn't surprised when there were volunteers who asked if they could be on this episode and talk to you. And it was a really easy decision for me because there were 2 former guests who have been on the show who have done the heavy lifting today, and they have written all the questions for today's episode. So friends, leading the conversation today, we're going to have Natalie Daily and Stephanie Wilson. Natalie Daily has joined us now for 2 episodes, episode 196, Community Connections, and episode 248, Book Launch Party. Friends, for listeners who are tuning in, Natalie, would you please introduce yourself, tell us where you work, and a little bit about your library?
Hi, I'm Natalie Daily, and I work in Pasadena, California. And my library is a middle school library. It is a very extremely diverse community, primarily low income. And I have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. It is a STEAM school, and we also have a dual language Spanish program as well. And we are named after Octavia E. Butler. And so we have a lot of sci-fi programming and a lot of talk about dystopians and things like that at our school and science fiction. I have a busy place. I also am in charge of all the Chromebooks and things, and the obsession of technology. But I try to have a really vibrant collection in the library, and I try to get kids excited about reading in any way that I possibly can. And I try to just introduce them to books in lots and lots of ways. I do a science fiction festival and all different kinds of stuff like that.
Well, and friends, I'll be sure to include links to Natalie's episodes where we go into all this fantastic detail about bringing in those community members to sponsor so much of what is offered and to really create and enrich the programs that Natalie so thoughtfully prepares. Stephanie Wilson has recorded 3 episodes. Episode 184, Lunch in the Library. Episode 189, National Board Certified Librarian. And episode 202, Renovations. Experts chime in. For listeners who are just tuning in and meeting you, Stephanie, would you please introduce yourself and tell us where you are in the country and a little bit about your library?
Thanks, Amy. I'm Stephanie Wilson. I'm the teacher librarian at Mariner High School. We're about 20 miles north of Seattle in the great state of Washington. I service about 2,300 kids at my high school, grades 9 through 12. And my biggest thing I've gone through in the last 2 years is a rebuild. So I'm at the end of this. I spent last year in a 20 by 64 foot construction portable serving our students, which tested my patience. But in about 2 to 3 weeks, we get the green light to move into our new space. And I'm so excited there's no eviction notice on the end of the school year, that I get to have a normal year.
Well, I think you've earned this next year. I think you have paid your dues. You've got a war story nobody wants to ever experience themselves. So, Stephanie, I'm going to ask you to lead off the questions today. And Jared is going to be, let's say, assaulted with a whole bunch of questions from our lovely guests. And again, I'm taking a back seat. I really am grateful to Stephanie and to Natalie, who have so thoughtfully put together some questions because they wanted very much to have this conversation with Jared themselves. So take it away, Stephanie.
Thank you. And Jared, we're so excited that you're here. I think there's 3 fangirls right now. Just like, we can't stand it.
The questions are great. I'm excited. This is going to be fun. We can make it. If there's things that we can kind of bounce back and forth too.
Sure. And the first one is from my English department. And my English department head said, hey, if you get to talk to Jared, can you ask this question? And I said, absolutely. So in reading through your book, you have a lot of autonomy where you get to design your curriculum with the balance of independent reading, time, and weaving an English curriculum. And some districts, they don't have that flexibility. And I'm curious to know your advice on how to assess independent reading. And when I read your book, I understood that you take student input and you do provide a grade for this. And the reason I'm asking is that my English department is philosophically split on this issue, whether or not independent reading should be graded. And there's one camp that feels that our students will be good readers without having a grade assigned, while the other camp feels that we need to hold our students accountable for this task. So I'm curious to know your thoughts for schools who don't have as much emphasis on independent reading as your FINE program.
Yeah, so I feel like in the book I talk about this idea of like being for or against, right? Like we're in today's world, we're always like expected to pick a side, for or against, whether it's sports, obviously politics, parenting, like education, right? And so whether the debate around like choice versus the classics was, it's both, right? Like I feel like this one, it really is going to depend on the group that we have. The same thing we'll talk about, like the idea of did any of you grow up with with deer, drop everything and read, right? And so like the idea of deer, some are big on it, like the spirit of it. I obviously believe in the spirit of deer and what that represents, and the idea that it's this beautiful time that's not graded, right? That there's not this pressure that we, there's not like an exit ticket and all this stuff that schools do to take away that love of reading. And so in some ways I am a purist, right? I believe that we should have this beautiful sacred time every day for students to get lost in books of their choice without any strings attached. At the same time, I understand from a school, school leader perspective, even just from like an English department perspective, where sometimes that time isn't used. We're not maximizing that time, where teachers aren't necessarily bought in, and so they're trying to grade papers while students are reading or not reading at all. And that time doesn't become as valuable and productive as it could be. And so in the book, I spend a lot of time breaking down our read and wrap routine. And so wrap, W-R-A-P. And so that time where the timer goes off, students close their books, and we wrap. We write, we reflect, we analyze, we participate. And so we'll talk more about that throughout the show. But I feel like, to me, to your question, that wrap time sometimes is graded. Not always. There's times where we chat, we turn to a friend, and we talk about what we're reading, and we maybe have a sticky note and make a little note of something we're thinking about, a question we have. Maybe we're writing a 6-word summary, or we're writing a quick poem. And then those things may not be graded, right? It's practice. But there are other times where we are grading, right? We are grading that prompt. So to me, the answer is both, right? There is a lot of times where students are able to read freely and not feel that pressure. But there are also other times where they are being held accountable in a productive sense, right? Like a healthy accountability, where they're crafting a really, character analysis. We're going to grade that. We're going to look at it. We're going to model it. We're going to share examples. They're going to edit, and they're going to be held accountable, or a book review, or a really awesome letter to an author, right? And then we actually send them out. And so we will grade. And so I think to those teams, like, don't make that the make or break. Like, I feel like the department, there's going to be enough. I talk about this in the book a lot, and I've been thinking about it. There's enough conflict in the world. There's enough there are already plenty of people who are putting educators on, attacking us. We don't need to be attacking each other, and we don't have to agree on everything as a department. But I feel like, come together, set some norms. If there's some things we want to agree on, great. If we think we want to trust our people and allow it to be a little bit different in each room, great. But I think my personal belief would be that it's a little bit of both.
And I appreciated the differentiation of activities that you had in your book regarding the wrap, just as you said, where you're taking a couple minutes to reflect, or whether it's a bigger project, because holding kids accountable, I think, is the missing piece in our school for their reading, not just enjoying reading, but having kids think about the reading.
Yeah, it's like, actually the last couple of years, and I'll say this from the jump, it's gotten harder, right? I think we can all agree, like the last couple of years especially. I love young people. I love working with young people. I'll be in the classroom, I imagine, for as long as I'm teaching. Like, I love it. It's really hard. This work is really, really hard. And so I think, honestly, the accountability, it's been helpful. Like, it's been helpful for them to know that, hey, I'm looking at their work, and they're going to get credit for that work in some sort of way. And I know over time, when you have, like, for adults, we as adults who are already readers, we probably wouldn't need it, right? We wouldn't need a grade. But I think you have to get to that point. And so I think if we can get to a point where eventually, if you have a school full of readers, which is the dream, right? Where everybody in our classroom, everybody in our school is a reader in the capital R-E-A-D-E-R, that they wear it proudly, then you could really probably do whatever you wanted, right? I think you could get to that point. But in the meantime, having these checkpoints, hey, I'm gonna be looking for X, Y, or Z, I think is actually really helpful. But again, not to the point that you're destroying that love of it, right? You're trying to help students get into it, get back into books, and you don't want to do things that discourage that, or that, right, that decrease the likelihood that a student's going to continue to read that book at home, or on the bus, or in the cafeteria, or wherever. And so I think just being careful and being mindful of that is important, obviously.
I'll move on to the next question. On page 53, you talked about your partnership with your librarian. Yay. And can you talk to us about that in greater detail? And how was your teacher librarian important in supporting your program?
So yeah, I'll talk in two different stories about this, right? So some of you may know I recently moved from Nashville to New Jersey. So I'll be getting ready for year 3 at a middle school here in New Jersey. First day, even actually before day 1, school librarian reached out. And there was a long story where there's a connection. My wife, before she moved to Nashville, did her student teaching at my middle school. So she knew the librarian a little bit. So that connection was already there. And so she reached out, welcomed me to the school, anything I needed. And we've been just this dynamic team. I think the past year especially, I had a year to kind of get settled and then feel it out. We worked on writing a grant together. So we were able to purchase 25 copies of 4 or 5 outstanding middle grade books we can talk about. And so we're able to do our lunch. And Stephanie, I need to check the episode out with your lunch and learn, because that's where we did it. So we're doing that with our book club. And we put that together. We're working on that. Our students are constantly in the library with her, checking things out. And so there's just this great partnership that is really special to me and really important, because I think for the English teachers who are listening, I feel like that's got to be number one. I wrote about it in the book. Like, you're number one, if you're ready to a new school or new place, like reaching out to your librarian. And then also my advice to the librarian side is like, not every English teacher is good. Don't stress yourself out trying to like please everybody all the time, right? Like, I feel like find the English teachers who are excited about the work that you're doing together, share the goals that you have for your library, share the goals, obviously make time to hear your English teacher share what their vision is, but we'll talk more about that. But I feel like we've been able to do some awesome work in just the 2 years that I've been there. In Nashville, Project LIT community grew because of the librarians in Nashville, period, right? We started the original chapter, the first Project LIT chapter was in our classroom at Maplewood High School. And that group, we were a really special time in my life. That group, our founders, right, the co-founders of this community and this movement, we created the original, the first inaugural chapter. But the reason it grew, the reason we're having this conversation, I think, is because of all the librarians in our district that came to book club first. They came to our high school and sat down at tables with our students and talked about The Hate U Give and All American Boys and Long Way Down and a whole bunch Border Crime, the 57 bus, and they saw it in action. They saw it, right, with our young people. And then they went back to their libraries and to their schools and started chapters. And together, we created as a district, right, we created a district-wide model for what Project LIT can look like. And then that was because of the librarians. And then having conversations like we're having right now, they went back, talked to their English departments, and developed a plan that worked for their school and their chapter. But that was really Stephanie Ham, who was the director of library services at the time. She was the first one, biggest ally. We spent a lot of summertime together. We sat down. How can I help? How do we work together? And over 2, 3, 4 years, we really built something. And so that was the bittersweet part about moving, was just, losing out on all the friendships, the personal and professional friendships with really our librarians. And then in a big district like ours, the English departments were constantly turning over. But you a lot of times had these amazing librarians who were there, who then could bring, English teachers, get them up to speed and help support them. But to me, having even just a librarian and 1 or 2 English teachers, you start with that. That's all you need. I think a lot of times we're looking for 100%. That's just hard, right? You start with a couple, you build it out slowly, you do some great work together, more people come around. Like with our library, they're like, what are they doing in there? Why is there food? Why are there authors visiting? And they come in, and then you slowly you add more to your crew. One thing this summer I would say, while we're on the topic, for the librarians listening or English teachers, just make a list. Make a list of people in your community that you think care about this stuff, that care about kids. They don't have to even be readers, but that would help. They care about reading and literacy, but really they care about kids, right? And make a list of those people. They could be in your building, in your community, local colleges and universities, nonprofits, and just reach out to think about setting up those initial conversations, share the vision you have, how they can get involved. And when you start to do book club, or for us, building our little libraries, we'll talk about, you start to invite those folks in, and then you start to just build out, this team of people that cares about this stuff. And then when you need, hey, we need breakfast for a book club, who can chip in breakfast? hey, we want to, gift cards for our trivia competition. Who can chip in, Amazon gift, things like that. And you have these people that are part of your team. To think of the other end, I also worked at a school for a couple of years without a school librarian. And you think about the challenges that we face there. And so I've seen that. And so another conversation, but I think the importance, I've been really, really lucky.
This is very inspiring. It's like, I gotta go. I need to go get this set. I need to go find my friends right now.
And can I just interject? Wouldn't it be great if there were some building administrators who are listening as well? Because ultimately, whether a school has or doesn't have a school librarian, oftentimes is directly tied to funding. And the funding is entirely controlled by the administration, both at the building and the district level. So if it isn't a priority at the building and district level, it is awfully hard for one teacher to say, we're missing a school librarian, and that working from the bottom up is a lot harder. If you can get an administration that respects and values school librarians, half of our job is made so much easier.
Well, you think about when I was applying for jobs right up here, you look at the districts and their mission statements and their visions and their 5-year plans. Almost all the schools, the districts that I look at, when you see what's on, what they have on paper at least, right? The work of the library is hitting all those things. We care about literacy, obviously, is a priority everywhere. We care about social emotional learning. We care about student-centered. We care about community, engaging our families. We want kids to be able to come together and talk to each other and collaborate and have these safe spaces to be together and to learn, to think critically, and to all these things happen in the library. It is literally the center, the hub, the heart of these schools and of our communities. And I feel it now even in my town, the public library, we'll talk about that in a little bit. The public library, we were just there an hour ago. My son was there. We're there all the time, and there are events happening, and he looks forward to it. He wanted to go to the library today over the pool, right? Over the playground, the library. And, well, it was also because we let him wear his dinosaur costume, and he could not wear the dinosaur costume in the pool. But the library, they loved it. He's walking around. So the libraries, and I think you're right. And there's a chapter in the book that helps folks who need to make support for independent reading, but also I think that works with in terms of there are some strategies we can think through of how to help folks advocate. But that's exhausting, right? To have to try to convince people why you're important, why the role is important in the space. And that's with English teachers too, convincing folks why independent reading matters, why it's important. It's exhausting. And I think we're all tired, right? We're tired we want to be able to spend time doing our jobs, right? And interacting with kids and planning events, not having to fundraise and to convince folks. But I know that's the world we live in. So we try to, it's a balance. But I feel like school leaders who are listening, the importance of our library, and not to be what technology and testing coordinators, that's part of it, sure, okay, that you need for your shorts. I get that if there's a small part, we all got to chip in a little bit. But what we've done in a lot of places, another quick story. The first job I had, I was teaching middle school. The best librarian ever, LaFonda Davis. I wrote about her at the end of the book. Miss LaFonda Davis, the best librarian, literally the person in college. We're all, we're surviving, right? We're reading just to get through. I got back into reading for pleasure, reading middle grade and young adult literature because of Mrs. Davis. And seeing what she did to that library was magical. In a place where there was constant turnover. She was forced out before retirement because what they did. A new principal came in and turned her into a related arts teacher and a testing and tech, and she lost the ability to do what she loved and what the kids loved about her, and it was disheartening, right? And so I think what we're seeing is, as a society, we're losing people like Mrs. Davis, in a lot of places, in our English teachers. And so that, I think about the work, it's personal for me too, right? With 2 young children now, I want them to be able to go to school and have someone like Mrs. Davis there to talk to them and to know what they want to read, what they're in the mood to read, and to make recommendations, to have poetry cafes, and to do all the beautiful things she did. And it would be such a loss if he was in a school where there wasn't somebody like that. And some people just don't know, but we know. So if you know, when we know it's not okay. I think they being whoever they are just hoping that people don't say anything about it, that people don't care, they don't notice. And that was the shame, because a few years later, I was back in that library, and the library was no longer being even used. Was off limits. So that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah,
but
I'm afraid I have a similar story where I was the I was the librarian who was reassigned, and one of my colleagues about 5 years later connected with me, I don't know, at the grocery store, and said, "Oh my God, Amy, whatever you do not come back to look at your space, because it would crush you." I was like, I can't go back. So no, it absolutely, you leave a legacy, and all you can do is hope that it is continued. All right, Stephanie, let's fire another one. Yeah, keep it going. I know he's on a roll.
This 2-hour broadcast will be, no, I'm joking. No, Jared, you're lovely. This is fantastic. You had mentioned a number of solid resources to build your collections, and with bookstores and organizations such as First Book Marketplace, which had amazing prices. Have you worked at all in capacity with your public library? And if so, to what capacity?
I would encourage everyone to check out Limitless Libraries. It's a system here, a partnership here in Nashville, not here in Nashville anymore. I miss it. It's a partnership between school libraries and the public library system in Nashville. And so a student at any school in Nashville can access any book in the entire county, right? And so the books are delivered by a Santa Claus. It's incredible. And so it's really a beautiful partnership where students, no matter where they were in the city, had access to any book at pretty much any time. It would take maybe a couple days or at the most a week to get to their school library. But it's this incredible partnership. And so they're doing incredible work. I would encourage folks to check out Limitless Libraries. And to me, it's a model that I believe should be, followed and studied and then replicated across our country. Up here, it's a little bit different. The only thing that I've done right now to help, so our school library, Stephanie, to your point earlier about the renovation, our school library, she was working at the end of the year because of renovations in a really small space as well. I would request books I would go online and order books from our county public library, and then pick them up from my home library and then bring them to the classroom for them to read, and then return them when they were finished.
Public libraries they're a great resource. When I had to close the year before last, I had to stop checkout fourth quarter. My heart broke, but I signed up every student for a public library card so that they could get digital access, or they would be able to be just a few blocks away. So that helped me.
It's a simple thing that I feel like schools should prioritize, right? Is like, can we make sure that every student has a public library card? Like little things like a checklist, a back to school checklist like that. Do we want to make sure that everyone in our building, for Natalie, if it's 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, does every 6th, 7th, and 8th grade student feel comfortable in our library, being able to check out a book, have a public library card? Little things like that as a school, I feel like we're so big on measuring the test scores and data, but little things like that where we want to make sure by the time you leave 8th grade, we can guarantee like you have a card, you feel comfortable. Anyway, there's little things like that I think are really important that we sometimes forget to do.
And hopefully let them become lifelong readers.
Really quick about the public library thing, because sometimes it's the public library system that helps to really push it too, and that partnership having to be at that administrative level there. I know that LA Unified Schools have worked with the LA City Library Program, and they just give all the kids a library card. So like generally you have to have a parent signature. It's a whole thing. I mean, in California, you can get a library card anywhere, but there is just forms and signatures and things like that. But LA Unified has a partnership with our city library where they just give every single kid a card. It's called a student success card. And I think it has a little bit of limits, like maybe they can only get 5 books at a time or something like that. But it definitely, it's automatic. And so they don't have to apply. There's no barrier. There's no language barrier. There's no parent signature. You have to go hunt down and lose a form. They just automatically get one. And then it's really, really easy to just use it.
Jared, this one I'm really curious about. How do the yearly selections of Project Lit books get vetted and selected?
Yeah, great question. Short version, in the beginning, Project Lit was our one chapter, right? It was a group of high school students at Maplewood High School. And so the books were selected by those students. So we were working together to think about the books that we wanted to read as a group. There's another question coming later about looping. The founding group of Project LIT students, I had the honor and privilege of working with for 4 years. They came in as freshmen. I've taught a lot of them in 9th grade English. I've looped with them, taught most of them as sophomores in honors too, again as juniors, and again as seniors. The most incredible experience I'll ever have. Nothing will ever compare to it. It was the best experience. I taught about 40 or 50 students for 4 years, their entire high school career. I would have taught them in college if I could. My home base was the freshman academy, so I taught most 4 sections of freshmen, and then I had two groups of 10th and then 11th and 12th grade. That group in the beginning was selecting and driving everything about Project LIT. That was Project LIT. As we grew, as we encouraged other teachers and librarians to become what we call Project LIT chapter leaders, the community started to drive our selections. And so the process now, teachers, librarians, chapter leaders, students are nominating books every year. They're nominating books, middle grade category, young adult category. We're then taking all those nominations, putting them together into a ballot, and then students and teachers and librarians in our community are voting on our class. So the short answer is our students the short answer is our Project LIT students and chapter leaders are responsible for the entire selection process. And it's really awesome. I think that the vision in a perfect world, students would have a chance to read all of them beforehand, right? But because a lot of times the books are new, they're reading summaries, they're previewing, and so they're going on books that they think they want to read as a chapter. But the goal is that students, they're selecting books that they're most excited to read as a group. And so our students and teachers and librarians are driving that. And so the next list will come out in November, December of 2024.
And I always get so excited because I wake up and as I'm having breakfast, I go onto my social media to see what books were selected. And it kind of keeps me in check too, to be like, oh, I already have that ordered for my collection, or, oh, I need to get that ordered. And I think my students will enjoy that.
That's the goal, right? The goal is to make it fun, right? To create excitement around books, to celebrate books and authors the way that we talk about sports and athletes a lot of times, and to create some excitement around it. We have a slow reveal, so books are announced gradually over that 1 or 2 week period, which is really, really fun. Authors get involved and share videos, and to me, that's just like it's such a great, especially around the holiday season, as people are buying things and just creating something for those, supporting those authors. It's a blast. Over time, I'd love to see more support from publishers to be able to send out copies to kids and to our chapters, do some more giveaways and things like that. But it's a blast, and I'm excited. We're already starting to gather some nominations. I'm getting it ready for the fall.
Our students have changed significantly since the pandemic, and attitudes towards reading have changed. And do you feel like there's a need at all for high school teachers or teacher librarians to reach out to middle school teachers and teacher librarians to have some courageous conversations about the importance of reading?
Of course. I feel like, to me, I think a somber note. When my dad passed away unexpectedly 5 years ago. And so I was actually at our second Project LIT Summit in Nashville. I was finishing up on a Friday night with an amazing group of teachers and librarians and authors who were there in town. And I got the call. And so that summer then was just a mess. I was going through my dad's old stuff in his house, and we found all my old yearbooks and trophies and this big black journal that I had from elementary school, and it had all of it was a letter from me to my second grade teacher, this beautiful thing. And I talked a little bit about the books I was reading, but not a lot. And so I say that to say this: I would love to know the books that I read in elementary school, in middle school, and high school, right? I would love to have that list. How great would it be if our librarians and our English departments were helping to make sure that students were keeping track of all the books they read in middle school, and then the eighth grade, the librarian in the middle school passed that off to our high school librarian, and then the students could continue to update it throughout their high school experience. And to know, the middle schools are spending all this time investing in reading, these reading identities, and so then to be able to have those conversations with our high school should be 100%, right? It should be, yes, right. Of course. I feel like back to how we started, this work is really hard. And so I would just love to see, again, we're going to disagree on some things. We're going to disagree on what books to read. We're going to disagree on choice versus the classics. We're going to disagree on, we're saying, well, should we grade our, like, we're going to have different approaches, but we're all in it. The good ones are in it for the same stuff, right? To help make sure our young people are healthy and happy and are getting lost in these books and finding themselves. And so I feel like this collaboration should just be ongoing across schools, across grade levels. And if you're in a small, if you feel the same way our kids feel really lonely right now, I know loneliness is a big topic. The book Anxious Generation. I know a lot of us feel really lonely too. I feel that way. I'm in a small district now. Finding folks in other schools and other districts that we can connect with and share what's working, share what's not, share books. So the four of us are on this call. We each commit to finding, right? We each commit to fundraising for one book that we love. We read it with our crew in the library. And then every quarter we all meet up for coffee and we swap those books and we share what went well with the book, what we did with it. Hey, here are these questions. We created a kahoot with it. Hey, we brought in the guest speaker around this. You should think about this. Oh, this flopped, but maybe, hey, try this out. Just 4 people, right? And 4 people get together and we can do some great things. So I feel like between the high school and the middle school, between the middle school and the elementary school, we had our Lit Buddies program, which I want to get back, crank that up again. Our high schoolers would go down to the local elementary, deliver books, read aloud, all sorts of, and there's so many cool things. And I feel like adults are a lot of times the problem, right? Adults get in the way. So we say, forget about the adults. Let's focus on our kids. Let's connect kids in our, a lot of us are in K-12 districts, right? And so finding ways to connect our elementary, middle, and high school teachers and our kids in these really fun ways. And so I feel like 100%.
So I'm so grateful, Stephanie. Those are fantastic questions. And again, this is such a refreshing opportunity for me to just sit back and enjoy this conversation. Natalie, let's go ahead and, this is now your opportunity to pepper our guest, Jared, with the questions that you have so thoughtfully put together.
Thank you. This is so interesting and fun, just listening to kind of, you talk about all the importance of literacy and the importance of reading. And I the way I kind of always think about kids, our kids, the kids these age, like middle school, high school kids, I always just think, how important it is that they read. Obviously, just it's a life skill, right? It's also the best way to gain empathy, right? Just to jump into someone else's shoes and to really you can focus the best, right, in a book, way better than anything else if you really can get in there. And I constantly have this thought, and this drive in that if we could just get kids to view reading as entertainment, right, where they go to it because they know that they're going to enjoy it. Like, that's it. Like, that's the most important thing, I think, that especially when kids leave middle school. I think if we can get them to just see it as entertainment, there is literally nothing more important that we could possibly be doing at school than that. However, at my school, and my district has extreme inequality. And, at my school, we have kids with extremely low reading levels that come in. And they're not literate when they come into middle school. We have kids that are reading below a second grade level. And I'm just curious, do you have a lot of experience with kids with extremely low literacy rates? And how do you approach choice reading with them? How do you help them gain fluency and stamina and phonemic awareness and comprehension while also keeping them engaging with that compelling writing that is more age appropriate and that can, meet their cognitive and emotional needs?
Yeah, that's such an important question. I've taught in I think 4 different schools now, and a couple were very similar to the one you're describing, and it's hard, right? I think it's only getting harder, and I feel like there's so much pressure put on teachers and librarians to solve this problem alone, and it has to be a school-wide effort. It has to be a community-wide effort. At the same time, there are some things that are still within our control, right? And so each group is different. And again, it's even harder when you have even within one block, one class, you may have advanced students who are reading at a college level and the students who are reading at a first and second grade level. And that's really hard, right? That's like Herculean. And that's where, in some ways, independent reading becomes one of the better strategies, where you can set some students up to go and they're ready and they can take off and feel like they're being challenged. And you can then pull smaller groups and have audiobooks available and read alouds ready in ways, high-low books, right? In ways that you can try to address that. But here's what I would say. At a simple level, I think, so when we commit to independent reading, and what we see is that if students can't do that, right? And they can't read independently, that's right there lets us know we've got to do something. Like something is wrong if this 7th grade group cannot read a book of their choice. It's not their fault, but we have failed them up to that point. And that's a way for us to say, wait a minute, you're expecting us to move forward with this, this grade level curriculum that has been purchased, right? It hasn't been created by teachers. It's been purchased by a district. And you're expecting us to follow that. Meanwhile, the students that are here in this room cannot read 3rd or 4th or 5th grade level book on their own. So we have to go back and do something differently in our day-to-day, not lowering expectation. It's actually the opposite, right? I think people who have been paid a lot of money to use the name, throw the word equity around to say, we're going to give every student the same thing at the same time in the name of equity. That's just not what that means. That's just not true. It's really hard work, and there's going to be different strategies that we go through. But independent reading, I think we can then see right away, week 1, whoa, let's slow down. We can put on, so for a couple times we would play, for example, Long Way Down. We listen to it together and build some success and build out this unit around that. So students who weren't ready to jump into their own books right away, we would be able to go jump into other books that we had, class sets available or audiobooks available, back to the partnership with the library, and then go from there to your point around what that classroom should look like on a day-to-day basis, which we can get into. But that, to me, I try to tell administrators, like, if they cannot read independently in here, please come in here, like all of us in this building, in this school. And, we should be able to say to a family, by the time your child leaves 8th grade or 5th grade or 12th grade, we want your child to be able to, they're going to be able to read independently, right? Like we should be able to do that and promise a family that. And so I feel like instead of abandoning, what schools are going to do is just abandon the practice, right? They're going to say, we're not going to do it. Instead, we're going to do, whatever the worksheets are, or this curriculum that, like I always say, a text is not rigorous if no one reads it, right? A lot of times in these schools, it's like on paper, it looks really, really heavy, intense, like, advanced stuff, but the teacher's doing all of it. And then what are students doing? They're acting out. They're shutting down. They're misbehaving occasionally. And I don't blame them, right? And so what happens is schools have moved away from reading novels at all. And back to your point about empathy, at the same time, young people are, I think, in some ways, are becoming less empathetic, right? Because they're being overexposed to stuff online. And what they're seeing online we've overexposed them online to the internet and what they're seeing there. And the algorithm has got them, and they've got their snap streaks to meet every day. And so they're getting bombarded with all sorts of crap. And then we're saying, we're not going to read fiction. We're just going to give you some stuff that we've bought.
Well, and it's like often it's like little excerpts of things and like little nonfiction piece and all this kind of here and there. And it's like, you're not going to grab them with that, And I always say, like, why aren't we treating it like a 5-alarm fire? This is a 5-alarm fire, and everyone needs to treat it like a 5-alarm fire, because nothing is more important in any classroom. Nothing is more important than a kid who cannot read. There's nothing more. It is, and I really truly feel like it is the civil rights issue of our time. And we need to treat it that way, because we're, like you said, like, we're failing them. And it's like, sometimes I get a sense that it's like, is there a shame that everybody feels and they just don't want to recognize it? They don't want to say what it is. And I think that that's it, because they know that the adults are the ones that screwed it up, and they don't want to admit that that's what happened. And it's like, that's what we need to do. We just need to have like a reality check, And
I know we said it earlier that I've had support, and I'll be honest, there were a bunch of years where I didn't have support from our district. I was kind of going, I was asking for forgiveness, not permission, and a lot of times, and the district would try to take credit, right? There's a whole long story we could share later about like the district was trying to take credit for Project Lit while actually trying to discipline me for not following the scripted curriculum at the time. But meanwhile, we had students, to your point, if you asked everybody else in the building, students who were not in our room, what books they were reading, like the answer would be zero. Like they were not reading books at all. Probably not doing much work in the English classroom at all either. We were reading a book a month the entire year on top of the nonfiction we were reading and the conversations we were having. And then we're also, because you're trusting them, you're empowering students, we were able to dig into ACT prep together. We're looking at grammar together. We're taking it seriously. And so by the end of those 4 years, not that everything we're doing was perfect, right? There are things that I would do over and I would do differently. But by the end of those 4 years, we had 13 students receive full ride scholarships to Belmont University. We had, on average, students outperforming their peers by 5 or 6 or 7 points on the ACT reading and the ACT English. And if you look at their math, the math was about the same. A little bit, they scored a little bit higher in math, but not nearly what you saw in English and reading. And part is like we were reading every single day, like actually reading. And I wrote about in the book where there's this crazy thing where the people in power who have the clipboards who come by and the walkie-talkies, and they're mad when they see people reading. They're like, why are your students reading? Shouldn't it be like, how are you getting teenagers today to read? How are you doing that? And I do think it's going to come from the parents, I think in a good way, right? Where more and more parents are going to be asking that question too. Like, I want my child to have time to read during the school day. I want you as a school to help my child have that. So I think we'll see, and there's more, cell phones are being banned. There's more conversation around like the danger with like over-reliance on tech. And I think we're going to see more people coming together to agree that it's an issue. How we go about doing it, though, that's to your question, right? That's the hard work. And it's hard, and that's also, I think, why it doesn't get done, is that it's hard. And it's going to be like each classroom is a little bit different. And they don't like that either. Like they want me to teach the same thing to period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in this. But they're different people with different needs. So but I think having a simple level, having great books available is help. It doesn't solve it, right? It doesn't, by no means does it solve anything in itself, but like having a great unit around Long Way Down or around listening to Trevor Noah read Born a Crime. What a wonderful gift that was, right? We love, and then we're the connection to writing, but then back to how we start with it all connects. So social emotional learning, attendance, behavior, it's all, so students who are engaged in the English classroom are less likely then to act out. They're not going to be getting in trouble, sent to the office, sent to ISS, to OSS. They're in the classroom, they're engaged, attendance goes up, grades start to improve. And so like it's all connected, as opposed to some schools say like, we're going to have this one program that's for SEL. This one is about attendance. This one is about, we can do all of it together if we take it seriously and commit to it. That's why I think the book, the reason I love writing the book is that I hope that I can just help people have those conversations and not try to solve it in a day or one meeting, but begin them and continue to have these conversations.
But even just your strategy of just like reading the books with the kids too, and just making sure and just allowing time and space to just like read it collectively. Because if a kid can't read on their own, reading as a group, it's like sometimes, I used to teach English for years and years. And, that was the thing, is just like a lot of times a kid, I would never ever read a book if I didn't read these books with you. Sometimes they just need someone to just read it with them. And then no matter what level they're at, then they are accessing and they're getting that, they're getting just time and experience with it, because it's an exercise. It's like a muscle you have to exercise, just like if you're trying to be able to run or anything else. It's just, you just have to invest time in it. And I think your strategy is about even just listening to it. And obviously, the Trevor Noah Born a Crime is a great example of one to listen to, because he has such a wonderful voice. And, he does the voices of his family members and things like that, right? So it's a great example. And just the fact that you're even championing the idea of, audiobooks as being reading is really important as well, because that's the thing that a lot of people, don't want to, admit to. But that's something that's extremely important, especially to reach those kids who might have lower literacy rates. And similarly also to English language learners, that was my other question too. I have a school that has a huge amount of English language learners, and that's always a thing, in trying to get them up to speed. I'm curious, do you have a lot of experience teaching English language learners? I know that this is something that if people in their community do not have them now, they will have English language learners in their classroom at some point. Our country is changing, and we have immigration is widespread, and people will have English learners in their classroom if they don't already.
Yeah, no, I've had experience as well, and I feel like, I think to your point around whether it's individually, whether it's listening to something together, possibly half the group is able to go and read something on their own, half or pulling it to a group. I think to me, it's so hard. It can be paralyzing as a teacher, as a librarian, to feel like you can be successful, right? To feel like, because we know that we're not really being set up for success in a lot of places all the time. And so to know, okay, I am going to start my block with our read and wrap routine. That just may look a little bit different depending on the group that I have. And so if I have a great relationship with a librarian, hey, we may be able to brainstorm different books that may make sense for a read aloud together, or to help get connected to audiobooks, right? Individually or collectively. So that teachers don't have to spend their own money either, right? A lot of times people don't realize how many free resources there are, right? So helping just and get students connected. And so if we know we're going to start the block with read and wrap, just knowing that, but once we know our group, and I was going to talk about this a little bit later, in the book I talk about our literacy dashboard. So building out, I think the librarian to me can be the one that runs the dashboard, that controls it, that is the literacy leader in the building. So put my library hat on. I'm the librarian for our building. I have a dashboard, and it might just be a fancy Google sheet, and it's got every student's name, and then it has all the important stuff that we think is, we can plug in there. Attendance, so we can flag it's attendance, at rate, whatever the different metrics we use to flag attendance. Behavior, test scores from the previous year, grades. We can do GPA at the high school level or whatever grade we pull up grades. We can have our reading attitude survey that I have one in the book, but the librarian can help administer that for help teachers take it off their plate. Create this school-wide reading survey. Have the data go into the dashboard. The librarian probably can help figure out how many books a student checked out the previous year. That can go on there. Students can self-report. How many books did you read the previous year? English language learner, right? Students with disabilities, students who are new to the building, students who writing assessments, internal writing assessments. We do an NWEA map benchmark. We have that data. So we put all of that in. The school librarian can be in charge of that. And then instead of saying, just looking at one data point, right, which is maybe an end of year test score, we have this really, really comprehensive dashboard where we can start to connect the dots and look at trends across classes. And so that dashboard becomes a way to have these conversations, right? To look my period, my fourth period, I'm looking here. We're looking at trends across grade levels. And then you can then determine the best plan of action based on what you're seeing with that. And we're updating it throughout the year. And so I feel like that dashboard, I have one myself that I keep each year, helps us make sense of what we're seeing. And then we're able to then develop a plan that makes sense for that group, if that makes sense.
That's a really interesting idea too. And I think that the librarian in the school is the teacher that has, the most kind of global view of everything. We have a global view of all the classes. We have all of the students kind of, we see it from just kind of a different perspective than just who you have in your classroom, which is a really unique view. And I'm curious, when you're talking about building more of a school-wide reading culture, how much do you collaborate with content teachers, or how much do you kind of talk to them and try to encourage them to encourage, independent reading, or do you kind of stick with just the English teachers?
English teachers are usually hard enough but I do feel like, again, where you're getting a sense that folks are interested, I think inviting folks in right away, right? Reaching out, hey, here's what we're doing, here's how you can get involved, whether it's coming to book club, and a lot of folks would do that. I talk about read and wrap, but I think the best way I found to get our social studies and the history folks in, our science folks, is through our article of the week. And so the article of the week, Kelly Gallagher is who I first found. He's a California teacher. He's done great work for a long time. the article of the week is something that we could see students reading in social studies or reading in science. So starting their block by reading something interesting, something good, right? And they're annotating it. And if that could be taken off my plate and know that they're reading some really good informational text, some nonfiction, some things about, like in the fall, like why the leaves are changing. Let's read about that. Like what's going on in the world that we should know about. That's a great way. And I have a bunch of examples for those who are hearing this and want to learn more about what the article of the week looks like and how that can be brought to our other content areas. I found that to be a really easy way in.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I always wish that one regret that I have when I was an English teacher is I wish that I had partnered more with a history teacher to do historical fiction to go with, what they were teaching. Because I just feel like that it was always such a missed opportunity. I'm just dying for an English teacher and a history teacher that are besties so I can just work with them and help them come up with
Completely agree. I know.
So maybe this year I'll find my...
Whoever's listening to, I'm sure we could reach out to Amy too and share. Because I think you're right. That's something. So back to, we said this idea, the independent reading, right? To me, the approach, some of you may have seen it on our Project LIT account, our socials on Instagram especially, the read widely and read often motto, right? And so I think some students need more support to get to that point. To your point about reading for pleasure, reading for just something they love to do, helping them do that by creating these different collections and themes throughout a year. So to help support them, we're gonna read let's read whatever, something historical fiction this month, whenever it is, and supporting them there, reading at least one graphic novel, one novel in verse, reading dystopian. We talked dystopian to start, right? Helping create collections around different genres and themes and giving students choice within those, right? But I think getting some structure there and then creating opportunities possibly in social studies or book club. But I think the idea that just helping students the same way sometimes it's could feel overwhelming to choose anything, right? I'm sure you all see this in your libraries or where so I think exactly. So I've thought about how to create this which is hard to do, right? But it's perfect sequence for a year, and students could then dabble in different things. And so by the end of a year, you could say, hey, I read 10 books, I read one, whatever those end up being. That's something I'm constantly thinking about, and I don't know the right way, because as soon as you limit, then it's then you're doing the same thing you don't want to do, which is telling the students you got to read. I don't want to read historical fiction this month. I want to read a thriller. It's hard.
And it's kind of a way to build on that accountability that you were talking about before, right? Reading wide, all different kinds of genres. You're not just stuck in the one narrow thing. You want to read. Although as long as they're reading, obviously that's the most important thing. Even if they're reading, even if they're stuck in that genre or that author, who cares? It's as long as you're there. But just kind of encourage them. I've been toying with the idea, and I have them all set up. I have all the graphics made and everything for all these reading challenges, like an author stand challenge, like a time warp challenge. Just reading from different time periods and just all different kinds of challenges. And one year I've got to have the year where I have the time to just launch it and just really trying to encourage, and not as an accountability way, but it's just yes, I'm going to do this. Someone, taking on a goal, making a goal for themselves and wanting to meet that challenge for themselves, and trying to get some buy-in and maybe some rewards. Maybe I'll get it together this year.
The last couple of years I've had students create their own individual reading challenges, and they kind of work. They go on Canva and they make them, and they look really cool, but then they kind of just fall flat, right? I feel what I think what we're talking tonight even helped me see this even more clearly, which is that a lot of our young people like us are looking for community and connection and belonging. And so even though we think we may be limiting them, sometimes it actually is, it's doing good, right? Overall, not, again, the readers who are already reading, we let them go. We trust them. We don't even have to grade their things. I know we talk about that. The ones who are reading, hey, don't worry about it if it's going to stress you out. But a lot of our young people are craving some structure and some good accountability, but then a chance to actually be able to get with their friends and talk about it and to ask questions and to laugh and to cry and to feel things and to look at each other in the eye, not behind a screen. And so however we can do that, formal ways, informal ways, to get great books in front of them and then create opportunities to talk about it. And that if I look at what I did before COVID, I was doing incredible work that I'm not doing right now. I'll be right. It's like the book clubs with the amount of book clubs we were doing, like it's not as pretty as it used to be. And we're not as, I haven't had an author in a while. It's harder to get, authors are struggling too, right? So for folks who are listening, who are worried about, I say this to myself too, like, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to always look great. It's not going to always be flashy for social media. But if we're doing the good work of getting books to kids and creating spaces to talk about it, that's a win. And if it's 10 kids to start, that's a win. If it's 100. And so I think we're onto something too, which is like just creating, whether it's challenges, if it's for me, I don't know. I'm thinking like I have this Google Doc right now where it's, what do I want to make sure students know or can do by the end of the year? And I know people say that there's pacing guides, but I mean more like literally, like I have these like 100 Greek and Latin roots and prefixes that I want them to know. And like last year they loved it. Things like that, like some actual grammar skills that they can apply to their writing, like really like concrete stuff that I'm like mapping out the writing that we're going to do. And so if I can say by the end of the year, and it could be aspirational, not punitive, but the idea of like, by the end of the 8th grade year, I want you to be able to read at least one novel in verse, one graphic novel, one historical fiction novel, one memoir, go down and like see how many can do it. And then we help support them on that journey. But I think talking through with you, sorry for the listeners if it was long-winded, but I think it's helpful just to have these conversations, right?
Well, if I find my doc with all of my challenges, I can send it to you so you can see what ones that I brainstormed and came up with. I think I came up with like 10 or 12 different ones that I'm thinking that, kids could have a choice and sign up for one. Maybe Amy and I can talk about it later too.
Yeah, because
we'll see if I can keep going, Amy.
How cool could it be for you to say, if you think through like 6 through 8 or 9 through 12,
yeah,
by the time you leave our middle school,
yes,
we want you to read at a minimum, across. And you think about, here are the ones that are required by the school, like class novels, great, right? There's a few that are required, fine. Let's not go crazy with fighting over those. Like, let's not waste our energy fighting over those. If they're good enough, we keep them in there, great. Then let's add in, and so at a minimum, whatever that number is. But how many places is the answer 0? Yeah. Right? If it's or if every student by the time they left 8th grade all listed the same 5 books. Right. Or 6 books. Like, how sad is that? We're missing out. Then we're wondering why they're going to ChatGPT to do everything. Yeah. Right? And then we're complaining that they're plagiarizing. Like we're getting mad at them. Yeah. Yeah. What else are they going to do? So we're talking about the reading widely. And I think obviously, that's super important thing. And so in that, I'm thinking about like the classroom library and the capacity of a classroom library to be able to provide the opportunity to do that really wide reading and reach all those different kinds of interests. But also the classroom library is so important because it's right there. It's immediate. There's no excuses. Here's a book, put it in your hand. You can just go ahead and read. I'm just kind of curious to know like your philosophy and just balancing the collections. Obviously, like my space in my library is so much bigger than any classroom, and I can have thousands of books. And I have a lot of shelf space, but I do the whole perimeter shelf. It's a lot of shelf space, and I love that about it, that it's a lot of shelf space, and the classrooms, maybe they've got 6 shelves if they're lucky, so I'm just curious to know, like, how do you view developing a classroom library collection, and then where, how to strike that balance to where, it's like a kid's, it's like, you got to go to the big library and like be able to hand that off. Like, I mean, the way that I kind of think about it is that like, I love the idea of like having the first book in a series maybe in the classroom, but like the school library has the rest kind of thing. Does that make sense? Like, well, how do you view that kind of relationship between the two collections? Yeah, in the book, I outline like the level 1, 2, and 3 libraries, and then like the dystopian library, which is happening too often, right? Like the libraries that are being I feel like if the teacher has the money, right, the money themselves, or the time to hustle, it's the most rewarding hustle there is. Like, I loved it in Nashville. McKay's used bookstore. It was about 15 minutes from my house. Yeah, it was the best because you would bring books that that either. So when we started Project Lit, we started with a book drive. And so what happened was we encouraged people in Nashville to donate books, used, new. If you want to just clear out your garage, your attic, great. We'll take anything you want. What we did, we spent our lunches sorting books, counting books. We had a big goal of 5,000 and 10,000 books. We kept the good ones, right, for our classroom library. But then we took the ones that were discarded and the ones that we weren't going to read. Because I think we talk about access. Yes, book access is important, or it needs to be access to high quality books, right? Culture sustaining, books that matter, books that are if you're putting a bunch of books that are the musty, we know the books, right? If we're putting those books in our libraries, that's actually disrespectful, and it's decreasing the chance that we're going to actually nurture a bunch of readers in there. So we kept the good ones. We brought the bad ones to McKay's, and they would take them, and we would get store credit, right? They'll give you a big yellow sticker with you could take cash or you could take store credit, which was more, and then we'd be able to go browse the shelves there and pick out other great books and bring them and fill our classroom library. The hustle is awesome if you've got the time for it. I love it. I used writing grants, time consuming, but again, you put the 5 hours in up front. Once you write one, you've got a lot of the language to write other ones, and like it pays, right? Because then you have these amazing conversations with your young people, and your job is easier and more rewarding. So if you've got the time and or the money to go for it, I say go for it. At the same time, there are also times in your life where that's not possible, right? And so if you are feeling that way, you also just be okay with that. Don't feel bad about not being able to build the classroom library, because there should be a school library there. And like, right, if there's not, that's where we go back to advocacy, how we started the conversation. And so right now my library is at level 2. It's got a bunch of good stuff. It's got the greatest hits, like you said, a bunch of books that I know that can draw folks in, especially the folks who don't, right, who need a little bit more support, who don't want to go take the walk to the library for whatever reason. I've got enough there to get them started. But a lot of our readers know, like, hey, head to the library, or if it's not there, get your library card. I'm going to show you how to do it. It's somewhere in the county. I promise you we'll get you this book. If not, I will, right, I'll go on an order for you, and we'll make it happen.
Nothing breaks my heart more than me not having a book that a kid wants on my shelf.
I know, but it's that's the part where the last couple of years, I think maybe you've seen it too, where maybe because I'm at a new building, a lot of students, like, they're quieter about their reading. I don't know if I talked to the folks in Virginia the other night, and they felt the same way. Where like, you're just not getting as many students like coming in, like sharing out loud what they need from you. And so just like creating space in our room, in our library, to just send notes, to request things via email, through writing, through sticky note, and just like keep that line of communication open, because it was really jarring for me at first where students were finishing books and not talking to me about it. Where like for so long, like they would finish it and like they would just call me by my last name. It would be Amato. I finished it. Let's talk about it. And like that for so long, that was like kind of like part of my day to day. And the last couple of years, it's been I just felt like it's just felt different. And so I'm like trying to just figure out like ways to keep and the ways to like let students know that I am there to help them find, like you're saying, to find the next book and be a resource where I think sometimes they're afraid to ask. And so that's been a new challenge for me that I'm trying to troubleshoot a little bit.
Yeah, I think that definitely there's a hesitancy in just physically using your voice and talking with kids, just from, social isolation and things like that. I wonder if they can, email you or something, or they are comfortable in something like that, or some kind of a texting or something.
Yeah.
Their thoughts about the book. I don't know. So you and I share alma mater. I also went to Vanderbilt, and I don't know. I did my teaching degree there. Did you do your teaching degree?
I did not. So I went to college to be a sports journalist.
Oh, okay. When I was reading your book, there were so many things about it that the philosophy that you have reminded me so much about what I learned while I was at Peabody. So I don't know if you know that, but like Peabody at Vanderbilt, that's the education school of Vanderbilt. It's actually a really progressive education school. And so many of the things about, student choice and reading. And I think even back in the early 2000s, when I was there, I graduated in 2002, they were, having us read, really, diverse authors, BIPOC authors, stuff we hadn't heard of, not reverting to the stuff that we read when we were in middle school and high school, and really branching out to different stuff. And I just felt like, I don't know, it made me think about, the fact that like education schools really do shape, kind of our philosophies often, right? And about how we teach. And I'm just curious to know, like, if there's anything that you wish that or would hope for, for teaching schools to inspire in their future teachers, to make them want to do this kind of work, to really, lay the groundwork for kids to love reading? What do you think is lacking, and what do you wish that they would be doing more of?
Yeah, I mean, even like the simple thing, like how long the lesson unit plans are. Like they're like 13, 15, 17 page documents that are full of things that I'm like, what am I reading? Like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, this doesn't even make sense. Like my lesson plans have like day by day, they're clean, they're clear. I'm thinking through everything from like the lens of a student. Like, what would it be like to be a student in this room? Like, is this going to help me? Is this going to matter? And I feel like, and again, I don't want to be part of like the shaming part. So I think there are a lot of people who are really well intentioned, who are doing really good work, and so it's not meant as a knock. But I think sometimes our English departments, and then to that, if you look back, then it'll be like the teacher, the teacher prep programs are part of the problem, right? Like there's this disconnect between what our students need, what today's students need, and what we're prioritizing in our programs and in our curriculum, right? There's just this disconnect, and it's really nobody's fault, right? But like it's real, and I sensed it for a long time, and I feel like it's just a matter back to what I hope this book can do, which is just like start over. And that was why I was so mad during COVID, that like we had a chance to reimagine things. I think they were just like, no, we're good. We're actually not. We had like a couple months where like, oh, teachers, librarians, thank you. And then like that was really like, actually, no, you're the problem. Like, wait a minute. So I was really, really angry that we had this opportunity and we didn't do anything with it. And so I feel like
I thought that 8 million times.
I was so mad, and I was so mad writing the book. You could probably feel it in parts of it. And I felt like we have this obligation and this responsibility to do things better and to do things differently. And we're just not in a lot of places. So if you are in a place that's trying, thank you. Like that's all we can ask. We're not asking for things to be perfect, right? If you walk into my room, it's not like every day looks perfect. Like there's chaos in there, and there's weeks that I'm on it. There's weeks that I'm struggling just like everybody else. But I'm constantly reflecting and making changes this summer, even though I've got 2 little crazy ones downstairs. Like I'm still thinking about, like, back to what we were saying, like I'm going to add in some more Greek and Latin roots, because I felt like I haven't really been as strong with vocabulary. Grammar, I've been looking at like patterns of power, which is good, but I think there's sometimes it gets a little, if any of you looked at it, it's a little bit too much occasionally. Like, how can I combine the patterns of power, like the grammar concepts, but like tie those into our rap prompts and kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Whole class, right? Back to what we're saying, like independent reading just on your own the whole year is actually right now probably not what we need. We need some more like communal experiences. So what is that going to look like? Book club, how can we make sure we're consistent with book club or not? Things get busy, how can we plan that out? I'm constantly thinking about those things. And so the more that our colleges can really just like prepare students for what they're actually going to see in their community, and then have these real partnerships. Like Vanderbilt's really good about establishing partnerships with our district. But then at the same time, the district would, Vanderbilt's saying one thing and believing these great stuff, and then the district's buying curriculum that goes against everything in Vanderbilt's. And so it's like, it comes back to a lot of times like politics and money and power, and the kids suffer when it's about that.
And I think that's one of the things I appreciate so much about your book, is that it's really a framework for teaching, right? And it's like you can use it as a tool to adapt it in many different ways, but it's a framework. There's all these pieces, and they're reusable in many different contexts and in many different ways and many different texts. And I think about that all the time, even in just if we could just get back to just really engaging with books and having a framework that can be reusable to use in many different kinds of books, just so that people feel comfortable with kind of doing their own thing, and to be able to, actually kind of create curriculum. You know what I mean? It's like you don't really need that much. These writers are writing these wonderful stories already. Like, it's already there. We just need a framework to use it, to engage with it, and to grow with it, And so I really appreciate that part of your book, and the user friendliness of it, and the way that it is really a way that you can just use and adapt and pull from. And so I think that I hope that it gets into the hands of a lot of teachers and a lot of librarians, and people can just be brave and be bold and to be able to just kind of use these tools and just be free. It's okay.
Thank you for that. And I'll put this out there for folks who are interested in collaborating. So if you're listening to this, it means you care about this deeply, right? You're spending your free time to learn and to grow and to push yourself. So if you're listening, here's the two things I'm thinking about, the ways that we can continue to collaborate around the book, specifically, and then we'll talk Project Lit briefly too. Read and wrap. What do you think that could look like in your school, right? Share ideas with me. Like, we could just build out just a Google Doc full of wrap prompts. I have a bunch, obviously, in the book already. I'm reading a book right now about reader's response. I forget the exact title. I'll share it, but I'm reading that right now. And so I'm adding more prompts to my bank of, right? So if we just have this ugly little Google Doc full of hundreds of beautiful prompts that we can then pull, right, to your point, depending on the book that we're reading, the grade that we have, the standards we're trying to hit. I'm open to, I'd love to collaborate with folks to develop more prompts that can happen in the library, right? That can also then happen in the classroom. So read and wrap prompts I'm always looking for. And then our Intro to Lit unit, I have a whole chapter dedicated to like starting the year strong. I'm updating that for myself right now. I'm looking at the book. I'm like, well, I'm going to keep this. I'm going to keep this. I'm going to tweak that one. So I'm tying in this idea of like, what does it mean to read, learn, and grow up in this digital age? And so students are going to reflect on that. Like, who am I as a reader, as a person, as a student? There's this, I found this article for the article of the week about brain rot. And so half of today's young people are chronically online, right? And what that's doing, like reflecting on that. And then also that's going to affect their relationship with reading and themselves and each other. And so they're going to reflect on that. We're going to have this debate. We're going to take debate too around technology, the pros and cons of technology and social media. We tried that out last year. And so that's going to tie into obviously like who they are as a reader. They're going to set goals and they're going to email me. We're going to do an email etiquette lesson. They're going to email me, about themselves and who they are as a reader and their goals. And so like I'm going to update the Intro to Lit unit for my classroom, but that's something we can also share with each other. Like, hey, here are these resources, articles, videos, podcasts, things that we want our teachers to listen to and our young people to listen to as we start the school year and as we commit to this work. And so those are two different things that are also connected that I love to continue to collaborate with folks. We can just build things out together, create resources that we're not putting them behind a paywall, or we're not going to have to like put them on TPT and put them in any fancy, not that I respect the hustle if you're doing that. I get it, but I'm saying we'll create these things that are just these free things that we have together. And then the last thing will be our Project Lit community. And I'll say this too on here. You don't have to use the name, right? I know people are worried right now. We're in a climate where you may be targeted. You may feel like if you put yourself out there, I get it. So whenever book club, whatever you need to do to feel safe to do this work, to continue to engage with young people, you're not upsetting me or our community if you've got to like just call it whatever you need to, but you've got these awesome booklets that are coming out and these opportunities to connect with fellow teachers and librarians to do this great work together. And so I'm excited to continue to engage with our community and to continue to get our booklets together, and ideally we can get back to planning if there's any rich people out there listening, the publishers and folks, if we can get back to doing a conference, a summit, right? The Project Lit Summit, we put that on in 2018 and 2019. Kwame Alexander, Nick Stone, Tiffany Jackson, Jeff Zettner, these beautiful parties in Nashville, bringing together teachers, librarians, students, and authors. And so if we can do that again, wherever, I don't care, we got to Tacoma with Kristen, we go wherever we need to go. I don't care where we do it, whoever wants to throw the party, but things like that, getting together back to, in person together, that's on my mind. And I love this work and love chatting with folks like the three of you, because I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I really couldn't.
I have to say, I have a book. If you guys aren't familiar with Dr. Maryanne Wolf, she's a neuroscientist. And so it's very, very in depth. And she talks about like the brain and what technology is doing to our brains, and then reading. And she has two, the Proust and the Squid, and then also Reader Come Home. She spoke to the California School Library Association conference, and her work is profound and so important. And those two books are so important for anyone who cares about student literacy to read.
So Stolen Focus, which I read, cites her work a lot.
Well, I will just say that one of the most compelling things for me when it comes to getting excited about reading is listening to other people who are excited about reading. And if we could use that strategy with our own students, I think it would have the desired effect, because when students talk passionately about the books that really move them, all of a sudden it's contagious and they want, other students are like, oh, I want that book. No. And they bring their friend. They're like, show me where that book is. And those are the kinds of behaviors that should not only should we encourage them, we should create opportunities for our students to be those, advocates for certain titles and authors and, like ambassadors, reading ambassadors. It would be really exciting. I got to tell you, I've got an incredibly grateful listening audience. They tune in. I get the fan mail. I get to see what they have to say. And I'm telling you right now, we have so many opportunities to support one another. This is one of them. And Jared, you're so gracious because I know your time is valuable. You're a highly sought after public speaker. And you're here just doing this out of the, generosity of your heart. So listeners are going to want to know, Natalie and Stephanie, I've got your social media. Would you please, Stephanie, would you please let listeners know where they can follow you? Because I know you've been important to me and my PLN. I really appreciate it.
I'm one of the last few people on the land of X at Mariner Library. And then you can find me on Instagram, MHS Mariner Library. That one's private, but if I see you're a librarian, I will let you in.
Well, and Natalie, your episodes are so incredible, and be sure that we've got links in the show notes to everything that we're discussing today. And because I wasn't doing any of that, the asking of the questions, I was able to start putting those resources in. Natalie, you've got some fantastic resources in the episodes that you've recorded with us in the past. I know you said you don't particularly like going on to X.
I deleted it from my phone for the summer. I was so proud of myself.
I'm proud of you, Natalie. Well, good for you. Not something I could do, but good for you.
Yeah.
But I imagine that if people had pressing questions, they could reach out to you at your school.
I am on, my social media handle is at Mrs. Daily MLIS on all the things, all of them. That's what it is on all of them. And but I definitely, I'm more, I use Instagram for work for my library, but for, so I'm on Instagram more, but I've been trying to take a little bit of a social media break.
Well, I'll tell you what, we are very grateful that you were able to share your time with us. And Jared, can you give us an idea? I have linked on the resources, your website, because you really have a one-stop shop where people can reach out to you regardless of the needs and so forth, your book and Project Lit. If people want to reach out to you, they can visit your website.
Yeah, and the Substack is the spot where I'm really connecting most with folks. So jaredamato.substack.com. That's going to be the spot. Like, I was really proud of myself for putting out a newsletter once a week during the year. I've taken a break this summer, but I'll be back in a couple of weeks, sharing all the things we talked about tonight and things that I've been working on. So there, social media a little bit as well. Yeah, at Jared Amato and at ProjectLITCOMM.
I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. Have a fantastic evening. If you enjoyed today's conversation, there's a good chance you'll enjoy reading Jared Amato's book. If you haven't purchased it already, you can find a link in today's show notes. Friends, if you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. So many of us have started our school year and are hopefully looking at possibly spending some money on building that collection you have. If you'd like to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more, use the code UNITED. See the link in today's show notes. The topic of our next episode will be Hacks for the Media Center and my conversation with librarian Joe Nass. I hope you will tune in.